And who else? Marlene.
Hi, and welcome to this panel on Black authorship in 2021. So what we are going to be talking about this panel is given 2020 and all of the dynamic things that have happened, all of the calls for diversity in publishing, all of the calls for making sure that people realize that Black lives indeed do matter, how does that affect us as authors going into 2021? Does anything change, or do things remain the same for you? And so we hope that this is going to be a very informative and thought-provoking session for you guys, both as authors and as attendees. That's fine. Take it away, Joanna.
All right, good evening. I'm Joanna Brockington, and I am the chair of this year's planning committee for Black Ink Festival. And so who we have on our panel this evening, Raquel Tolson, Vanessa Riley, Joyce Hansen, and Sharon Risher. And they will each tell you a little bit about themselves. So I will start with giving them an opportunity to tell you who they are, and then we will jump into the panel. So let's start with Raquel. Can you tell us a little?
Hi, thank you. I am an inspirational writer. I can't use Christian most of the time because some of my books, the Christians do things that they aren't supposed to do. They're real people. So I like to say I'm an inspirational writer. I do actually nonfiction, fiction, and my son and I actually have two children's picture books, Ren's Bedtime Prayer and Ren's Affirmations. Everything we do is about people, connecting people with spirit, with God, that God within, and having people to really think about what they're thinking about, especially in the Christian community, to really think about why they think some of the things that they think about. But you can find me at tolsonbooks.com to learn more about my books and me.
Thank you. Vanessa Riley, can you share a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm Vanessa Riley. I'm a novelist of historical fiction and historical romance. I focus on the Georgian and Regency eras, looking at our diaspora in England as well as the colonies, particularly the West Indies. I'm a hybrid author, meaning I have several indie books. I also have traditionally published books. I'm at 23 to 25 books at this point in time. This year marks my the second in my series, Rogues and Remarkable Women, which was written up in NPR, New York Times, Entertainment Weekly. The second book is coming out in April, An Earl, the Girl, and a Toddler, which is a follow-up to A Duke, the Lady, and a Baby. And in July is my debut in historical fiction. It's my first hardcover with William Morrow HarperCollins. It's called Island Queen, which culminates over 6 years of research to detail the remarkable life of Dorothy Kirwan Thomas, a woman who was originally enslaved, who buys her freedom, the freedom of her family, and becomes one of the wealthiest women in the West Indies. So she's one of the women that I think I always write about, that has achieved a measure of success against all the odds and is intermingling with the aristocracy, which are things that they said we didn't do, we couldn't do, wasn't possible because we weren't there, which are all because it's been his story. He has been writing it. Now we are writing it. And so one of the things that I'm most excited about is how women, Black women, are now telling stories that haven't been told before.
Thank you. And here. And just a reminder, everyone, if you're not speaking, please keep your mic muted. So Joyce Hansen, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Good evening, everybody. I've been writing for
I guess about 30 years now. I have 16 books, primarily of middle grade, and a couple of the titles were considered young adult, but they're not as I don't think as complicated as some young adult books are now. I don't have any steamy scenes in them, so they probably fall more into the middle grade category. But when I started writing, they were considered young adult. My first book was published in 1980, The Gift Giver, and to my surprise, it's still in print. The thing is, I can't believe that we're still talking about diversity, because we were talking about diversity when I first started. And I think when I started, there was no Facebook, there was no Instagram. I wrote several books on a typewriter. Very few people had computers, and I didn't have any. And I'm just amazed that we're still talking about diversity, that things haven't seemed to, I can't say they haven't changed, they have, because I think we see more children of color in the elementary books, in the younger books, in the picture books. And that I am so glad to see. I think the publisher who accepted my very first book, they had no black writers on on their list. And this was a time, like I said, this was in 1980 when people were talking about, there was an organization, I think it's the CCBC, Council on Books for Children. They had done a study and found that there was so few books written by, children's books written by black authors that had, been published. So, I lucked up. I got lucky. The publisher needed a black writer, so my manuscript was accepted. What do I see for 2021? Well, one thing I'm seeing is people are doing their own thing. Writers are self-publishing, hybrid publishing. I was very much impressed with one of the panels I saw where the writers were talking about just publishing a PDF and sending it to their friends. So that kind of opens up my mind too, because all of my books have been traditionally published. And I write historical fiction and nonfiction. I've also written contemporary books, but they were written so long ago, they're not contemporary anymore. But I think some of the themes are still relevant to what's going on now. The more things change, the more they remain the same.
Yes, and thank you. And Sharon Risher, can you share with us what you write, who you are, what's important to you? You're muted.
I feel like a neophyte. I've only published this one book, and this book came out of such pain and sorrow. So that's what triggered me to write the book about my mother, Mrs. Ethel Lance, who was killed in the Emmanuel AME church shooting. I had always kind of felt like I was going to write a book. You say to yourself, "Ooh, one day I'm going to write a book." I even had a title for the book, but I never did that. And then the tragedy happened in Charleston. And I felt like my story and my mother's story was relevant for that time and for today. In getting my proposal out there, it's just a lot. You never really know what it takes to publish a book until you get into the process. Luckily, I had help. So I did not write the book by myself. I had help, and I don't know if I would have been able to with this first book. I'm thinking about writing another book, but the lessons that I have learned through going through a publisher and all of that it takes to write a book is real. It's just not easy. I have been lucky because I had gained some national attention because of my activism and all of that. So it made me being able to market the book a little easier because I had already had some national attention. So that's kind of where I am. To be able to be picked up by a publisher is a big thing, you know. So I just hope that whoever's out there know that it's just more than a notion to writing a book. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of dedication. For me, it was very cathartic because then I started to remember and write about some very painful time in my life and my mother's life, and how that all came together in the pain in writing and helping to write that book. So that's kind of where I am in a nutshell. My book is considered inspirational and Christian and nonfiction. So that's about it for me for right now. Yeah.
Thank you. So let's, and Raquel, I think I'll start with you. What made you decide to write, and then to kind of answer the question that Savannah posed at the beginning, the difference between when you started and where you are, where things are for Black writers now?
It's really interesting. I don't think, as far as the content that I write, I don't think any of that has changed because I've always been Black. You know, this still my story, and I've experienced, you know, all the things that people are experiencing. I've experienced that. So some of the things that I haven't put a lot of that in it because I'm mainly kind of focused on people, their spiritual self. And me personally, everything that's been going on is more and more. I know that we have to be more about God is within and stop looking looking for the white people, the government, the politicians to save us, that we have to believe that we have the power to save us. And so that's kind of where I am, because we see it, especially after last week, you know, we see that so many police officers, so many politicians were a part of that whole insurrection, you know, whatever. We can't trust them. Point blank, period. I'm sorry. We can't trust them. Even the white people, that liberals that want to do right, they can't trust them either. You know what I'm saying? We just can't. So we have to remember that God within us and stop looking for God outside of us. You know, oh, we praying. Stop praying up to God. Start praying within the God, so God within you can move and tell you what you need to do, because we all have our parts to play in it. Some of us may be just taking care of little bitty kids and teaching them that they're great, you know, or writing books so little kids can know, little Black boys and girls can know that they have power, that kind of thing. But as one of the things that 2020 taught me for real, was that coronavirus, when everything shut down, because a lot of my book sales come when I go out into the public so people can meet me. It's because I have a personality that I know how to get people in, but then I had to learn how to try to do that from my living room, from my computer. How do I get people to know me? And then I had to, do I really want to be on TikTok dancing? You know, but a lot of people selling a lot of books that way. A lot of people getting a lot of people. I don't know that I'm ready for that. You know, so 2020 taught us that we had to think outside the box. We had to pivot. Like the biggest win in 2020, if you don't know, I'm going to help y'all real quick. The biggest win in 2020 was DJ Nice. If you don't know him, if you didn't know him probably before, you probably know him now, because even Oprah Winfrey, all of them going on Instagram, listening to D Nice, he had to pivot. He bigger than he ever was, you know, back in the day when I used to listen to D Nice, you know, mixing it. He pivoted. And so what 2020 taught me as an author is that I had to learn to pivot. I had to do things different. So, as far as the racial injustice, I mean, the only thing that has changed is that it's televised.
So thank you so much. We've had two people join us, Teresa Jenkins Hillard and Anthony Green Jr. And so Teresa, I'm going to start with you and ask you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are, what you write, and also the question that I just posed to Raquel is just tell us what authorship looks like, Black authorship looks like in 2021 in comparison to when you started.
Hi. Yes, I am a nonfiction author, I suppose. I'm still figuring out exactly who I am, but I wrote 2 books. The first book that I wrote in 2018 was Mama Dunk's Gullah Recipes. And it really came out of preserving my family's recipes, my grandmother, my mother, and my aunt, most of whose recipes were not written down, of course. And my children, once they grew up and went away, they would always call and ask me for certain recipes and so forth. And my aunt, who cooked for a wealthy family in New York, was the only one who had some things written down. She had an old string, makeshift recipe book, and I wanted to get those recipes down in writing. So it really, that book started out being really a scrapbook for the family, and it culminated into a recipe book that I published, and it sort of preserves the foodways of the foods that we ate way back, that I ate actually when I was a kid growing up with my grandmother on Edisto Island. A lot of the food which we no longer eat. So that is, and I was very fortunate with that the Post and Courier wrote an article, and from that I got lots of other publicity, Charleston Magazine and Essence Magazine and lots of other marketing that came from that. And it was a blessing for me because I didn't know anything about writing a book or marketing a book or anything. So I wrote it for my family, and I felt that, well, maybe there would be others out there who, would be interested in this. So that the children says, Mommy, you should publish it. And I was like, I don't know how to do that. But then figured it all out with their help and got it published. And then I just wrote my second book, which was just published in the end of November of 2020, and it's called A Guide to Charleston's African American Historical Markers. And that was birthed by me growing up partially in Charleston, although my early years were spent on Edisto. My mother lived in Charleston, and when I was old enough to be at home alone, I moved to Charleston with her. And she would always take me around the city and try to show me as much as she could at that time, being pretty poor and not having a lot of money or anything. But she exposed me to what she could expose me to. And as I'm also a tour guide, a City of Charleston tour guide. So and my tours in the historical district, of course. But then I set out to look for those places that I visited as a kid, and they were all gone. The other buildings were there, and I couldn't even remember the exact site, but I knew it was in this area, or sometimes I knew it was on this corner or whatever. So I had seen lots of historical markers, of course, in the historical district. So I just wondered, I didn't see any markers at those sites. So I set out to research that for myself. And the more I researched and the more I learned, I thought, other people would be interested in this too. So So I published this it's good for tourists. I mean, for people that's coming into Charleston, it's good for anyone who's interested in history. But for those who are coming to Charleston, and of course, it helps me as a tour guide as well to know where those historical markers and historical sites are. There are many sites, but they're not. But this book contains only those that have been marked that have historical markers. So those are the two books nonfiction books that I have written. I've also written a children's book I'm in the process of publishing soon. But I from the time when I started, actually, I'm really still figuring all of this out, and I still don't really see myself as an author quite yet. Because I don't feel like I have enough experience to call myself that exactly. People keep telling me that I am, so I've certainly accepted it and I receive it. But
that's great, Teresa. That's great, because I will say, as somebody who has been doing this for a few years, I can also say there are periods where I don't feel like I can say I'm an author either. But I will say you have been writing and you have been published and you have met the requirements. So, definitely claim that.
I do.
Yes. And I was going to say, you talking about, wanting to honor memory, honor culture, and then, creating that book to, make sure that folks see those markers of where, historical places were in Charleston that are no longer there. I was thinking of how 2020 in a lot of ways became that year where we went back to memory, went back to, things that used to give us joy that we probably put on the wayside. I know for me personally, I reconnected with a lot of friends that I hadn't been, keeping in touch with that I should have been. And, Anthony Green, who has also joined us on this panel, I'm going to toss this question to you. First, give a brief introduction again about who you are and what you write. But I wanted to know if you think that, how did 2020 and maybe memory and rememory may affect how you're going to, create your works going forward, or if not, so I think that would be a really interesting notion to consider as we go forward with this panel. Anthony, you're still. Well, in the meantime, as we're working through Anthony's microphone challenges, does anybody else want to pick up that question?
I'd like to. For me, 2020 took me back to the principle of sowing and reaping. So, there's a lot of things happened in 2020, but I think the manifest that we're seeing in 2021 really goes back to 2 Corinthians 9, 6, and 8 about generously sowing into the earth and you will generously reap. So those of us, whatever stage you are in your career, if you've been faithful to putting your stories out there, the harvest is now, because publishing has opened the doors, but they're going to look at the people who have books out there already, who've already proven that they can write these books, that have already gone out there and have started gaining an audience. So everybody on this stage is a published author. You've got a leg up on all the opportunities that are going to manifest. And there are opportunities manifesting. For me personally, when I got started, I submitted out into the world. I thought my book was great and got a publisher very excited about it. And an agent, this particular publisher, one of the big publishers, only worked with agented authors. So she actually called up the top agent and said, hey, this Vanessa Riley, she's got this story. I want you to look at it. And then if it's great, send it to me. Now, you know your first book is never great, right? Everybody knows your first book, never great. So my first book had every mistake known to mankind. I will firmly own up to that. But this particular agent, she didn't just go with, correct and resubmit, or, it's just not working for us. She took it to another step. She said that, in fact, that you'll never be published. I've worked with people like you. You will never get it. You've got some great ideas, though. You should get a co-writer. At that point in time, back in 2009-ish timeframe, the concept of a Black woman writing stories about Black women in the Regency was unheard of. They didn't know the history, and I didn't have a platform to tell people about the history. So you have a disconnect. Even our own people didn't know about the history. It didn't matter at that moment in time. I got so many cross-eyed looks from Black folks, white folks, every folk under the sun, because everybody believed what they saw on TV, that the Regency period was Pride and Prejudice, all white. They didn't know that Jane Austen, who wrote Pride and Prejudice, also wrote a book called Sanditon, who the richest character in the book is a woman from the West Indies, a mulatto woman, a Black woman from the West Indies, who everybody's scheming on to marry because she got loot. Okay? Nobody knows these things, but they know these things. But once again, as I say, his story. He who tells the story shapes the way of the world. And so for 2020, what it has taught me is, because I didn't give up, although I wanted to. God put people in my corner who said, if I told you to write these stories, why are you going to listen to that one person? And there were points where, after, I rewrote that first manuscript 125 times. Madeline's Protector DU, when you do your alphabets, because I would do A, B, C. When you get to DU, that's 125 times, just for those, paying attention at home. I got an agent off that proposal. It got published. But as my books got browner, we ran into this little problem again. And Lord put this friend back in my corner. She's like, you can write. You believe there's an audience for this, so what you going to do about it? So at that point in time, I started self-publishing. Books started flying. My one book with a bargain, in 1 week, 1,000 copies were sold. Didn't do any advertising. People just saw this face and the story sounded neat, and they bought it. So God, once again, this is 2013 timeframe, being faithful. We get to a point now where publishers are looking because they know they got holes in their lineup. So it's all about being faithful and keep going and pushing your craft. So now we get to 2020, when the whole world closes down, and the Lord opened up new opportunities to go to. I'm zooming in California. I'm zooming in DC. I'm in bookstores in May, places I wouldn't have gone, to be honest, unless they're going to fly me out there, because, I wouldn't go. But I've been there now because they were looking for my kind of stories to tell in these mass places. So 2020 taught me the sowing. So everybody, if you're writing what the Lord has told you to write, if you feel that unction to write, keep going. Doors will open. This year, 2021, you're going to see the fruits. Like I told you, my first hardcover is coming out this year. We got an announcement. One of my books has been optioned. Okay. God is continually opening doors. Announcements are going to be made. So all I have to say is be faithful. Be faithful to the craft. Keep sowing. God will put people. He will put white people. He will put brown people. He will put Black people. He'll Hispanic, all kind of people. And you will know that they are called to partner with you, because you will feel it in your spirit. You will know that they're not going to take your words and rip them up and mess them up and conflate them and change your story, because he's putting these people in your path. He's going to open doors, he's going to set tables for you to be there. So I just tell everybody, I don't care what things look like on the outside. You be faithful in the lean years, and you will reap more than you will ever be able to understand or comprehend. That's all.
So, amen.
Yeah.
But also that kind of just planted a seed in my head. Some of you may have heard of Lovey Ajayi. If you are on Instagram or if you listen to podcasts, she has a couple of nonfiction books out. But one of the things she often talks about is when she walks into a room, she looks for the helpers. And that is her prayer when she walks into a space that she's not familiar or about to embark on an adventure that she's uncertain about. Her prayer is that God send her the helpers. And so, as writers, as Black writers, who have been your helpers most unexpectedly? And so, Joyce, we'll go to you with that.
I had, when my first book was published, I had an unexpected helper in that. First of all, I just want to say that, as Vanessa said, you have to almost like I wanted to write even though nobody wanted to read anything I was writing. But I kept at it, as she said, trying to sew. But who turned out to be a helper to me was a professor I had. I had been sending out things and writing for about 10 years, getting nowhere. I had one article published in a little New York City newspaper called Carib News. I got my name. I was so proud of that. No pay and nothing. That was my first published article. I was really happy. But I was also a teacher, and I was getting my master's degree, and I was an English and special ed teacher. And I asked the professor whether I could write do something creative for my project rather than do a research paper. And he said, okay. Now, I was a seventh grade teacher. And so I decided, I said, well, I had an idea for a children's story. Now, all along, I've been trying to write adult fiction, some silly poetry. I just tore that up in case I passed away. I wouldn't want anybody to read those poems I wrote, trying to imitate Langston Hughes. But he said, yeah, you can do something. You can do a creative project. So I did. I wrote a children's story based on a lecture I heard from an artist who talked about how he taught children art by showing them the inside of things. And the idea came to me, suppose I created a character for a story who was different from the other children. He was able to sort of see inside. He was introspective. And just about 70 pages. I gave it to the professor, and he said he thought it was publishable. Now, had he not said that to me, I would have just put it away, got my grade, and that would have been the end of it, because I had decided I was not going to write anymore. I was tired of trying and getting stuff back to me. Because as I said to you all before, when I started, there was no Instagram, there was no TikTok. I still don't understand what TikTok is. There was so many things we didn't have. You just go to a publisher, an editor, and try to get your work, see what happens. So when he said that, first of all, I realized that my writer's voice was really in writing for young people, because my whole life was involved with kids because I was a teacher. So I used, as I wrote that story, I used characters from my own growing up days in the Bronx in New York City, and the students I was teaching. And that was the book that I showed an editor. I took to an editor, to this publisher that was looking for a Black writer because they didn't have any. And that was my first book, and it's still in print. So I give credit to that professor. He wasn't such a fascinating guy or anything, or a great professor. He had these yellow papers. I said I would never do that as a teacher. Keep coming back with the same yellow notes that I'm reading from. But he helped me in that way. Had he not said that. But over the years, I've had, as you say, Black, white people, encouragers. My family they have been very encouraging. And I've had some great editors. I have to say that. I really have had some patient editors, some good editors. And so you just have to keep at it.
That's amazing. And what you said about how you've had people encourage you, the way I feel about that is, especially when we say, I have a book idea or I have something I want to write, it's that encouragement that waters that seed, that tells you that maybe I can do this. And so sometimes you only need a few drops, you don't need a deluge, because I think to be a writer, we're pretty resilient. So, that's amazing, Miss Joyce. We have a question in the Q&A, and the question is, I am in a position to feature authors at a writing conference. How do I reach these amazing individuals? So amazing individuals on the panel, please tell our audience how they can reach you after this festival and during, because you have those booths.
So I have office hours after this in the arena. Or you can go to my website, vanessariley.com. You can contact me through vanessariley.com. That's it.
Yeah, I can be contacted through my website. If you write me, I will definitely respond. So I can be contacted through my website.
Yeah, myself also. You could contact me through my website. I'm on Instagram and Twitter and all of the social media platforms. But I did want to say about 2020, as being a new writer, when everything came, a lot of the traveling and speaking, a lot of my book sales came through my speaking engagements. So I ended up getting an agent to book things, and along with that came part of the pushing the book, because I was out there traveling doing my speaking. And when Corona started, I was like devastated. Here I am, a self-employed person living off the fat of the land with my speaking engagements and pushing my books. And then that happened. But then, of course, God was like, well, it's time for a new thing. And then I started to do the Zooms and all of that. And that was new for me. I still am not real good at it, but I've learned a lot and understand that regardless of what happens, your biggest cheerleader is going to be yourself. If you have confidence in yourself and the helpers that come into your life, I got turned down for my proposal I don't know how many times. The publishers kept telling me that nobody really wanted to deal with the Charleston massacre. People didn't really want, white people didn't really want to hear about that. So I ended up reaching out to a person I knew that had a book published and asked for an introduction, and then the rest is history. But we just have to keep pushing and know within yourself that you can do all things. So that's my little 2 cents about that. Thank you.
I can be found at tolsonbooks.com. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook as Raquel Tolson. I also have a Tolson Books on Facebook and Tolson Publishing, Tolson _ publishing on Instagram. So, and I will have hours right after this in the arena. Can I say one more thing about what 2020, because they are looking for content, and when I say they, I mean the streaming services, television, Lifetime, Hallmark, all of that, they're looking for it. So I realized that one of the things, even as a self-published author, we probably need to like find an agent to get that material in front of the people who are looking for content. Because I know Victoria Kristen Murray, she is, 2 of her books were optioned by Lifetime. So they are looking for more stories about us. So we are in a great time. And so we just have to keep working, keep sewing. And I think one of the things you said, Vanessa said, it was like so perfect, is that you just, I mean, like we have to keep writing and we have to keep sewing, we have to keep doing, because I only have 7 books. When I say only, because a lot of people have 30 books, 50 books. So it's really good for me to hear from them, because when I see they have 30 books, I'm still new at this. Of course, I'm not where they are. So I had to, so it helps me to look at my circumstances and not be down on myself. Like, you should be doing more. But like, you got 7 books, girl. You just keep writing. Keep writing. It's coming. The people are going to see you. You know, it's like, you just got in this thing. So if there's anybody else out there like me or trying to do it, or don't get discouraged. Know that you are writing. You have to sow. You're sowing into yourself. And one of the things is like, you have to define success for yourself. Success may not be being on a USA Today bestseller. It may not be that, but success could be that one person reads the book and they get it. And it makes the, and when I say get it, I'm not just talking about enjoy it. I'm talking about that they get it. Like it made them think, and it made them do something different. It made them teach their children different. It made them start walking different. That's like, so really having that success. So I'm a successful writer. I don't have no books in the movies yet. I haven't made $100,000 from selling books yet, but I'm successful because people have read my books and their life has changed. And so I am doing what God purposed me to do. And that's like one of the huge things about 2022, because people been taken up out of here by that corona disease. Okay. So I know that I have to keep doing what I'm supposed to do while I didn't get taken out. I'm here for a purpose. My purpose is to enlighten, to entertain, and to encourage people with my writing. So I'm going to keep doing it. And every time somebody tells me, oh, I love that, it moved me. Success, all right. But the money and the movies, they coming.
Well, you can reach me on my website at www.mamadunk.com. mamadunk.com. mamadonk.com. And I'm also on social media, Instagram and Facebook at Gullah Recipes, which is my book, at Gullah Recipes, Facebook and Instagram.
Thank you guys so much. Want to make sure I didn't miss anyone as we wrap up. And also, if you guys would be willing to post your websites in the chat, that would be great. And on behalf of Savannah, the Black Ink Committee, and all of the viewers, I want to thank you for your time, for your energy, for your amazing words. And we hope that you'll stick with us tomorrow for the rest of the Black Ink Festival. And thank you guys so much. Oh, and don't forget, we have your virtual booths available. So for those of you who are viewing, please go hang out with these great writers, get to talk to them one-on-one, learn a little bit about their craft, or ask whatever questions you have. They will be available in their booths. And we thank you.